bad do things have to get in Victoria before anyone takes action or even notices? It's a government of epic incompetence and a complete absence of integrity, yet no one seems to care. I don't know about you, but it makes me almost scream with frustration that something so bad is just accepted as a fact of life south of the Murray. Today, Victoria Police declined to reopen an investigation into the notorious Red Shirts affair, where taxpayers were ripped off nearly $400,000 for campaign workers, Labor campaign workers, pretending to be MP's electorate staff. The police statement declared that there were no new witnesses and no new information, even though since the last time police looked at this, former Andrews Government Minister Adam Somyurek has admitted to being personally corrupt and said that the Premier himself knew all about the scheme. Plus, Somyurek claimed Labor MPs were told not to cooperate with police when this was first investigated, to decline to be interviewed, to shut it down and make it all go away. Perhaps that's why no charges have yet been laid. But you tell me, what other citizens get to refuse to cooperate with a police investigation and the investigation just goes away? For any of us, it would only make things worse. But if you're a Labor MP, you're off the hook, it would seem. But what would we expect from the police force in Victoria that cheerfully used a defence barrister as a gangland snitch, started investigating Cardinal Pell without a complainant, and then brought a prosecution that the High Court rejected 7-0? And from a Chief Commissioner, Shane Patton, who was all over the Pell prosecution. That Victoria Police refused even to reopen the investigation, given Somyurek's sworn testimony under oath to IBAC, that's the corruption watchdog, and stated his willingness to testify in court, beggars belief. Except in Victoria, where the government can be found repeatedly to have overstepped the mark or broken the law without anyone admitting responsibility, accepting blame or being held to account. Here's just part of Victorian government litany of shame. An investigation by the Auditor-General that found the Andrews government had illegally engaged in taxpayer-funded political advertising. A former Andrews government staffer, now head of WorkSafe Victoria, refusing to find any individual to blame for the hotel quarantine fiasco that killed more than 800 Victorians. Happy to blame a government department, but no actual people, as if a government department makes decisions, but people don't. An IBAC corruption investigation that wouldn't call the Premier, even though he'd been named as a key figure in the misuse of taxpayer money because of very narrow terms of reference. And a judicial inquiry, the Coate inquiry, that wouldn't recall key witnesses nor delve into failures of accountability, despite explosive testimony implicating the Premier because it was beyond their remit. Let's remember that the original Red Shirts investigations went nowhere because none of the almost 24 Labor ministers and MPs were prepared to cooperate with police. This despite the Premier's declaration, of course, that they would. Well, now one of those ministers, Somyurek, he has publicly declared that of course he'd cooperate and possibly give police a whole series of new leads with which to re-examine other Labor ministers. Yet still, the police stubbornly insist today, nothing to see here. On top of everything else, starting with paying $1 billion not to build the East-West link that Melbourne so desperately still needs, this is a government that should have died of shame. But there are more inquiries now underway today too, such as the Ombudsman's report into stacking the public service. And reportedly, as we've heard this afternoon, another IBAC investigation into the government's dealings with the Firefighters Union. Personally, I can't wait until November, when I hope Victorian voters will finally have their chance to pass judgment on the world's most left-wing government and chuck them out. I just hope Victorian voters remember all of this and that the Victorian Liberal Opposition lifts its game.